Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. Galactic Cruelty. They fed a disabled girl to a dragon. What happened next shocked them all. The Galactic Council chamber, vast and echoing, was filled with an air of cruel amusement as the council debated their latest spectacle. A display of dominance was needed, a message to both the galaxy's defiant factions and the fragile humans. The council's leader, the towering and serpentine Vexus, let his scaled fingers drum rhythmically on the marble table. "We will give Zor our most fearsome dragon, a sacrifice," he declared, his voice a chilling mix of arrogance and finality. But not just any human, a child, one they would least expect, a fragile, disabled girl. The councillors erupted in laughter, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with amusement. It was decided. A 13-year-old girl named Alara from Terera, who had been captured during one of the council's raids, would be thrown to the dragon. Alara, golden-haired and confined to a wheelchair, was no stranger to challenges. The Galactic Council's guards viewed her as an easy target, assuming her disability meant weakness, but they couldn't see the fire in her eyes, a defiance that no chain or decree could extinguish. The barren planet Xian, home to Zor's lair, was a wasteland of jagged rocks and swirling red storms. Alara sat silently as the transport ship descended, her hands gripping the arms of her wheelchair. The guards, with their alien forms clad in obsidian armor, snickered amongst themselves. "She won't last a second," one guard sneered, his voice distorted through his helmet. "Draxier will tear her apart before she can scream." Alara's gaze remained forward, her face unreadable. Inwardly, her mind raced with the stories of Draxier, the galaxy's most feared predator, a beast of immense size with molten gold eyes and scales said to shimmer like a dying star. It had vanquished entire armies, yet Alara felt no despair, fear perhaps, but not surrender. The ship landed near the entrance of Zor's lair, a cavern carved into a towering obsidian mountain. The guards unceremoniously shoved her wheelchair toward the edge of the ramp. The heat from the cavern's depths radiated outward, and the air was thick with an acrid tang. One guard leaned in close, his scaled face twisted into a cruel grin. "Any last words, little one?" Alara's lips curved into a smirk. "I hope he likes his meal spicy." The guard stepped back, startled by her audacity. With a shove, they sent her wheelchair rolling down the uneven path toward the cavern's entrance. The chair jolted and tipped, spilling Alara onto the rocky ground. Pain shot through her arms as she braced her fall, but she gritted her teeth and pushed herself upright, dragging herself to a sitting position. She glanced up at the looming darkness of the cavern. From within came the sound of heavy breathing, a low rumbler that seemed to shake the very ground beneath her. The guards watched from the safety of their ship, expecting screams, begging, or futile attempts at escape. Instead, they saw a small figure pull herself toward the entrance of the cavern, her golden hair glowing faintly in the dim light, and exchanged uneasy glances. Inside the cavern, the heat intensified and the shadows grew deeper. Alara's breath came in shallow gasps, but her resolve didn't waver. When the sound of claws scraping against stone reached her ears, her heart pounded. The ground trembled as an enormous shape emerged from the darkness, Zor. The dragon's molten eyes locked onto her, and his lips curled back to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth. Smoke curled from his nostrils as he let out a low, guttural growl that reverberated through the cavern. Alara didn't flinch. Instead, she straightened her posture, meeting his gaze. Her voice, though quiet, carried a steely edge. "So, you're Draxier. I've heard a lot about you, big, scary, unstoppable. But I'm not here to beg or cry, I'm here to hack." The dragon paused, his massive head tilting slightly for the first time in his long, violent life. Draxier hesitated, his molten eyes glowed brighter as he regarded the fragile figure before him. The acrid air in the cavern thickened, and smoke curled lazily from his nostrils. His growl deepened, reverberating off the walls like a living force. Alara, seated on the rocky ground, steadied her breathing and willed herself to remain calm. "You're not what I expected," she said, her voice calm but firm. They probably told you I was weak, helpless, an easy meal. But they lied. Draxier's massive claws scraped against the stone floor as he took a slow, deliberate step forward. The heat emanating from his body was almost unbearable, but Alara didn't retreat. She locked eyes with him, refusing to show fear. "You're used to fear, aren't you?" she continued, her voice unwavering despite the dragon's imposing presence. "People tremble when they see you, they scream, they run. But I'm not running, and I'm not afraid." The dragon let out a low, guttural snarl, his head lowered until his molten eyes were level with hers. The sheer size of him was overwhelming, his head alone was larger than her entire body, his breath washing over her, carrying the metallic scent of smoke and embers. Alara held her ground. "You're not just a beast. I see it in your eyes. You think, don't you? You feel you've been betrayed just like me." Draxier's glowing eyes narrowed slightly, and Alara sensed she had struck a chord. Encouraged, she pressed on, "They threw me in here to die," her voice tinged with defiance, "just like they chained you in this cave, forcing you to live as a monster. But we don't have to play their game." For a moment, the only sound was the crackling of distant embers and the soft rumble of the dragon's breathing. Then, to Alara's astonishment, Zor lowered his massive head to the ground, his eyes locked onto hers. It wasn't submission but a gesture of curiosity, a willingness to listen. Alara smiled faintly, her heart pounding with a mix of relief and triumph. "That's right," she murmured. "You're not what they say you are, and neither am I." Over the next several hours, Alara remained in the cavern, speaking softly to Zor. She told him about her life on Earth, about how her disability had made her an outcast to some but had also taught her resilience and creativity. She spoke of the Galactic Council's cruelty, their arrogance, and their tendency to see everything, including Draxier, as tools to maintain their power. The dragon listened, his immense form coiled around the cavern like a living fortress. Occasionally, he would let out a low rumble or flick his tail, his glowing eyes never leaving her. "You're not just their weapon," Alara said, her voice firm. "You're more than that. They fear you because they can't control you, and they fear me because I don't fit their idea of what strength looks like." "But," she trailed off, a glint of determination in her eyes. "Together, we could be unstoppable." Draxier tilted his head slightly, a gesture that almost seemed thoughtful. He let out a deep, resonant growl, and for the first time, Alara realized it wasn't a sound of aggression but one of agreement. Outside the cavern, the guards watched uneasily from their vantage point. The absence of screams or signs of struggle unnerved them. "She should have been eaten by now. What's taking so long?" muttered one guard, a reptilian being with green-scaled skin, his eyes wide with disbelief. Another guard shrugged, adjusting his weapon. "Maybe the dragon's toying with her. Either way, she won't last inside the cavern." However, the dynamic had shifted entirely. Alara's boldness had won Draxier's respect, and a bond had begun to form, a connection based not on dominance but on understanding. As night fell, the cavern glowed faintly with the light of Draxier's molten eyes, and embers scattered across the floor. Alara, exhausted but determined, leaned back against a rock. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted softly, "but I do know one thing, I'm not letting them use you anymore." Draxier let out a low rumble, his eyes narrowing as if in agreement. The dragon stretched his massive wings, their edges gleaming like molten metal in the dim light, and turned his gaze toward the cavern's entrance, where the guards' laughter echoed faintly. "They think they control everything," Alara murmured, her eyes glinting with defiance. "But they're wrong. You're not their weapon, and I'm not their victim. Let's show them what happens when they underestimate us." Draxier rose to his full height, his scales shimmering with an otherworldly glow. He let out a roar that shook the very walls of the cavern, a sound that sent the guards scrambling in fear. Alara smiled, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "That's the spirit. Let's make them regret this." As the dragon turned toward the entrance, Alara pulled herself upright, her determination burning brighter than ever. Together, They moved toward the cavern's mouth, a girl and a dragon united by defiance and a shared resolve to rewrite their destinies. The ground outside Draxier's lair trembled as the dragon emerged, his molten scales gleaming under Xian's blood-red sky. Behind him, Alara rode on his back, her hands gripping the jagged ridges of his spine for stability. The guards stationed near the entrance froze, their weapons slack in their hands as they took in the sight. "She's riding him," one guard stammered, his reptilian eyes wide with disbelief before anyone could react. Draxier let out a deafening roar, his fiery breath illuminated the rocky terrain. The heat alone was enough to send the guards stumbling backward, their confidence crumbling under the dragon's fury. "Leave now and you'll live, stay and you'll face us," one of the guards hesitated, glancing nervously at his companions. But the leader, a towering alien with a hardened exoskeleton, snarled, "Fire! Take them down!" The guards raised their plasma rifles, and the air filled with the sharp hum of charging weapons. Draxier moved before Alara could shout a warning. His massive wings beat once to propel him into the air, plasma bolts streaked past them, but the dragon's agility defied his size, weaving through the barrage with ease. From above, Zor unleashed a torrent of golden fire, not to kill, but to scatter the guards. The ground erupted in a wave of heat, forcing the soldiers to abandon their positions. Alara clung tightly to Draxier's ridges, her heart pounding as the dragon soared higher. The lair shrank beneath them. "Good boy," she shouted, a mix of exhilaration and relief in her voice. "Let's keep moving. The council's not going to let this go." As they flew over Xian's jagged landscape, Alara's mind raced. The Galactic Council would soon realize what had happened, and their response would be swift and merciless. She needed a plan, and allies. "There's a settlement near here," she told Draxier, her voice barely audible over the wind. "It's small, but they might help us." "Let me do the talking," Draxier rumbled in agreement, angling his wings toward the distant cluster of lights. As they descended, the settlement came into view, a haphazard collection of shelters and machinery, populated by a mix of alien refugees and outcasts. The settlers panicked at the sight of the massive dragon, many fleeing indoors or grabbing whatever weapons they could find. Alara raised her hands, shouting, "Wait. We're not here to hurt you." Zor landed with a thud, his claws digging into the rocky ground. Alara slid off his back, her arms raised in a gesture of peace. "Please," she called, "we need your help." A grizzled alien with metallic skin stepped forward, his weapon trained on her. "Why should we trust you? That thing is a council weapon." Alara shook her head. "Not anymore. They tried to sacrifice me to him, but we're not their pawns. The council will come for us, and when they do, they'll come for you too. Help us, and we can fight back together." The alien hesitated, his gaze shifting to Zor. The dragon lowered his massive head, his molten eyes meeting the alien's with surprising calm. Finally, the man lowered his weapon. "You've got guts, kid. Let's talk." Inside the settlement's central shelter, Alara outlined her plan. The settlers, a ragtag group of engineers, farmers, and scavengers, listened intently. Many had suffered under the council's oppressive rule, their world stripped of resources and their people enslaved. "The council thinks they can control everything," Alara said, her voice steady. "They use fear to keep us in line, but Draxier and I have proven they're not invincible. If we hit them hard enough, we can give others the courage to stand up." The metallic-skinned alien, who introduced himself as CHR, crossed his arms. "You're talking about open rebellion, that's suicide." "Not if we're smart," Alara countered. "We don't need to win a war, we just need to show them we can fight back. We hit one of their key installations, something symbolic. Make them feel vulnerable." CHR considered her words, then nodded slowly. "There's a communications hub not far from here. It's how the council keeps control over this sector. Take it out and you'll send a message." Alara turned to Draxier, her hand resting on his scales. "What do you think, big guy? Ready to make some noise? The dragon rumbled softly, his eyes glinting with something that almost resembled approval. The next few hours were a flurry of preparation. The settlers provided makeshift weapons and patched up Draxier's injuries as best they could. Alara worked alongside them, her determination infectious. For the first time in years, the settlement felt a spark of hope. As night fell, Alara stood with Draxier at the edge of the settlement, the stars above casting a faint glow on the rocky terrain. CHR approached, handing her a small device. This will scramble their sensors long enough for you to get close. After that, it's up to you. Alara nodded, pocketing the device. Thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet, CHR replied gruffly, if this fails, we're all dead. Alara turned to Zor, her hand brushing his scales. We won't fail, she said softly. Right, partner? The dragon let out a low growl, his wings spreading wide as he prepared for flight. Alara climbed onto his back, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. Together, they launched into the night, the settlement growing smaller below them as they soared toward the communications hub. Alara's resolve hardened, the council had thrown her to Draxier as a sacrifice, believing she would be destroyed. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous, a girl and a dragon united by defiance and ready to change the galaxy. The communications hub loomed in the distance, a monolithic structure glowing faintly with alien energy, situated in the heart of a rocky valley. The hub was surrounded by automated turrets and patrolling drones, its defenses bristling with advanced technology. Alara leaned forward on Draxier's back, her sharp eyes scanning the terrain below. As we approach under the cover of darkness, we'll have to move fast, she murmured, her voice barely audible over the rush of wind. Their turrets are designed to lock onto anything bigger than a shuttle. Draxier let out a low rumble, his golden eyes fixed on the target. Alara tightened her grip on his ridges, adrenaline coursing through her veins. CHR's scrambling device was clipped to her belt, ready to disrupt the hub's sensors long enough for them to strike. As they closed in, the turrets activated their barrels, glowing with energy. A warning siren blared, and the drones began to swarm. Alara activated the device, a pulse of electromagnetic energy radiated outward. For a moment, the turrets faltered, their targeting systems flickered. Go now! Alara shouted. Draxier dove toward the hub, his wings cutting through the air like blades. Plasma bolts erupted from the drones, but the dragon twisted and spun his massive form, moving with surprising agility as they neared the ground. He unleashed a torrent of golden fire, incinerating the first wave of drones. Alara slid off Draxier's back as he landed, rolling to her feet and sprinting toward the hub's main entrance. A squad of alien guards emerged, their weapons raised. Halt, one of them barked, but Alara didn't stop. She ducked behind a stack of crates, her mind racing. Drax, I need cover, she yelled. The dragon roared, his molten breath scorching the ground in front of the guards. They scrambled for cover as Alara activated the device again, this time targeting the hub's security locks. Sparks flew from the control panel, and the massive doors slid open with a groan. Alara darted inside, her heart pounding. The hub's interior was a labyrinth of glowing conduits and humming machinery. A squad of alien guards emerged, their weapons raised. Halt, one of them barked, but Alara didn't stop. She ducked behind a stack of crates, her mind racing. Drax, I need cover, she yelled. The dragon roared, his molten breath scorching the ground in front of the guards. They scrambled for cover as Alara activated the device again, this time targeting the hub's security locks. Sparks flew from the control panel, and the massive doors slid open with a groan. Alara darted inside, her heart pounding. The hub's interior was a labyrinth of glowing conduits and humming machinery. She had memorized the schematic CHR had provided, but the scale of the facility was overwhelming. Find the core, she muttered to herself, her fingers brushing against the walls for balance. Find the core, shut it down. Behind her, the sound of Draxier's battle raged on, the dragon holding the enemy at bay. Alara forced herself to focus, weaving through the maze of corridors until she reached a chamber filled with pulsating energy conduits. At its center was the core, a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with a rhythmic glow. "This is it," she whispered, pulling out the small EP charge CHR had given her. "Time to send a message." She set the charge at the base of the core, her hands steady despite the chaos, and the timer began to count down, its soft beeps echoing in the chamber. As she turned to leave the room, it trembled, and a squad of guards burst through the doorway. "You're not going anywhere," one of them snarled, raising his plasma rifle. Alara froze, her mind racing. Then, with a sudden burst of confidence, she shouted, "Zor, now!" The wall behind the guards exploded inward, shards of metal and stone scattering as Draxier forced his way into the chamber. The dragon roared, his molten eyes blazing as he swiped at the guards, scattering them like leaves. Alara grinned, sprinting toward Draxier as the timer ticked down. "Time to go, big guy." Draxier crouched, allowing her to climb onto his back before launching himself through the hole he had created. The hub's defenses were in disarray, their systems overloaded by the impending detonation. As they soared into the night sky, a deafening explosion lit up the valley below. The hub's core erupted in a cascade of energy, its shockwaves shaking the ground for miles. Alara clung to Draxier's back, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "We did it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and relief. "We actually did it." The destruction of the communications hub sent shockwaves across the galaxy. News of the attack spread quickly, fueling rumors of rebellion and emboldening those who had long suffered under the Council's rule. For the first time, the Galactic Council faced a challenge to their authority that they couldn't ignore. In the Grand Council chamber, Councillor Vexus seethed with rage, his serpentine form coiled tightly as he slammed a clawed hand onto the marble table. "A girl and her dragon," he spat. "They humiliated us before the entire galaxy." Councillor Zin, a crystalline being with a voice like chimes, raised a delicate hand. "This is not merely an act of defiance, it is a symbol. If we do not respond, others will follow their example. We must crush them." Braxis growled, "Send the fleet, burn every settlement that harbors them." But not all councillors agreed. Silent, a younger member with shimmering, liquid-like skin, spoke up, "And what message does that send? That we fear them? The more we retaliate, the more we validate their cause." Rexus glared at her. "You would have us do nothing?" Silent replied calmly. "I suggest we capture them alive, their rebellion will falter if its figureheads are brought to heel." Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the settlement, Alara and Draxier returned to a hero's welcome. The settlers cheered as the dragon landed, his massive wings folding gracefully, and Alara slid from his back. "You did it!" CHR exclaimed, rushing to meet her. "The hub's destruction has thrown the Council's orchestrations into chaos." Alara nodded, exhaustion etched on her face. "But they'll come for us now. We need to be ready." "Ready?" CHR's expression darkened. "We've stirred the hornet's nest, that's for sure. But you've given people hope, Alara, and that's more powerful than any weapon." As the settlers began to fortify their defenses, Alara sat beside Zor, her hand resting on his scales. "They'll send everything they have," she murmured, "but we're not done fighting, are we?" The dragon rumbled softly, his molten eyes glinting with determination. Together, they had defied the odds, and together they would face whatever came next. The battle for the galaxy was far from over, but Alara and Draxier were ready to lead the charge. The Galactic Council wasted no time in launching their retaliation. Massive fleets of warships darkened the skies above Zirion, their sleek hulls bristling with weaponry. The destruction of the communications hub had embarrassed the Council, and they were determined to crush the insurgency at its source. Councillor Vexus himself commanded the fleet, his fury driving the assault on the settlement. Alara and Zor stood at the forefront of the preparations, as the settlers had turned their ragtag outpost into a fortress, constructing barricades and arming themselves with scavenged weapons. CHR warned, they'll send everything they have. We can't hold them off forever. We don't have to, Alara replied, her voice steady. We just need to buy enough time for others to see that the Council isn't invincible. Draxier rumbled in agreement, his massive wings flexing as he prepared for battle. Bolera placed a hand on his scales, drawing strength from their bond. They think fear will break us, she said, but they don't understand what it means to fight for something you believe in. The first wave of the Council's forces descended like a storm. Drones and infantry poured from the skies, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. Draxier roared, his molten eyes blazing as he launched into the air, unleashing a torrent of golden fire. The settlers fought valiantly, their determination outweighing their lack of resources. Amid the chaos, Alara directed the defenses, her voice carrying above the din, focus fire on the transports. Don't let them land reinforcements. The battle raged for hours, the settlement holding against overwhelming odds. Draxier was a force of nature, his fire and claws tearing through the enemy ranks, but the Council's forces kept coming, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm the defenders. As the situation grew dire, Alara activated the settlement's emergency beacon, broadcasting a desperate plea to any nearby systems. To anyone listening, she said, her voice resolute despite the strain, we are under attack by the Galactic Council. If you stand with us now, it is time to rise. The Council's forces surged forward, their weapons tearing through the settlement's outer defenses. Alara stood beside Draxier, her heart pounding as she prepared for the final stand. If this is how it ends, she murmured, her hand resting on his scales, we'll make sure they never forget us. Just as the Council ships closed in, a new signal pierced the air from the horizon, a fleet of ships emerged, patchwork vessels from countless worlds, their colors and designs as varied as the stars. It was a coalition of rebels, inspired by Alara's message. The newcomers descended on the Council's forces with unrelenting fury, ships strafed the enemy lines and ground troops joined the fray, their battle cries echoing across the battlefield. The tide of battle shifted as the Council's forces found themselves outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Draxier roared, leading a charge that broke the Council's lines. Alara fought alongside him, her quick thinking and unyielding determination rallying the defenders. Together, they turned the chaos into a coordinated assault, driving the Council's forces into retreat. In the aftermath, the settlement was a scene of both devastation and triumph. Fires smoldered, and the wounded were tended to, but the survivors stood tall, their victory against the Council a beacon of hope for the galaxy. KR approached Alara and Draxier, his metallic face etched with awe. You did it. You actually did it. Alara shook her head. We all did. This was more than just a battle, it was a message. The coalition's leaders gathered, their faces a mix of species and expressions. One, a fierce-looking alien with vibrant blue skin, stepped forward. The Council will come again, stronger and more determined, but now they know they're not untouchable. Alara nodded, her gaze sweeping over the survivors. We need to keep fighting, not just for ourselves, but for everyone they've oppressed. This is just the beginning. Draxier let out a low growl, his molten eyes reflecting the stars above. Together, they had defied the Council, forging an alliance that would ripple across the galaxy. The bond between a girl and a dragon had sparked a revolution, proving that even the most unlikely of heroes could change the course of history. As the coalition began to prepare for the battles ahead, Alara and Draxier stood at the edge of the settlement, gazing at the horizon. They'll keep coming, Alara said softly. Draxier rumbled in agreement, his massive wings unfurling slightly. Alara smiled, her hand brushing his scales. Let's show them we're ready. Together, they turned toward the future, their bond unbreakable and their resolve unwavering. A girl and her dragon, united against the galaxy's greatest power, had become the spark that ignited a revolution.